try to get the glare out. Perfect.
All right. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce everybody right now, just so we know what's going on. I mean, this was something that we seen me post about discussing a good political argument and addressing toxic behavior and any other topics that you guys would like to discuss. And on the bottom of the screen, I don't know how that's going to be portrayed, but you guys are both wearing glasses with the dark
Yeah,
shirt
I'm
is
trying to
Edward.
get my glare out of the glasses here.
I know,
Yeah.
it's tough.
Usually, the thing is, I have two monitors, and I often don't. I teach during the day, so I'm not always here
Gotcha.
when the room is so dark.
And the gentleman with the white shirt is James. And my name is Emiliano, also known as the Casual Radical. At least that's what I try to go by, just to get people's attention, to lure them over. Like, hey, he's radical. Let me go ahead and text them or message them. You know, it's to lure people's interest, I admit. So anyways, what would you wanted to start with? I know, Edward, you're pretty vocal about making good arguments. Is there a topic that you want to hold us accountable for, or something that you wanted to bring
I just
up?
want to. No, I really like the goal of your project, just to get people talking. That's what I like to do. So, and I had invited a number of other people from Facebook conversations that I've been having, but none of them could make it. It was pretty short
Sure.
notice.
Well,
But I mean, that's kind of my goal, just to hopefully we can do this like every month, and people can come back and we can
sure.
continue conversations and that kind of thing. I mean, the reason why I use Twitter, and I would like to know, that from you too, James, is I was writing a book starting in 2016 after Trump got elected with a friend of mine in the States about, okay, I mean, we need to raise the intellectual bar of the states. I mean, nobody's talking to each other, that kind of thing. And so we just started doing research on Facebook and Twitter, exactly what Emiliano's doing, just conversing with people. And the response was, I think, like 60% of my family and friends in the States blocked or defriended me just because I'm talking about issues such as religion, ethics, and politics with them.
Yeah. I mean,
And
one of
that
the
was just
challenges.
astounding. So, I mean, I'm a developer. I spend my time in code, teaching code and that kind of stuff, but I spend like 5% of my time just, getting into conversations online because it's so interesting. Why people don't want to talk, and why in the States and in other countries, I mean, things are changing now. I mean, it's certainly different now than it was 10 years ago. I would say after Trump, maybe, but just the amount of things, I mean, things that politicians do that are obviously corrupt and people don't say anything about it is just fascinating to me. And I want to get people talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's extra fascinating for people that are outside of the United States and just talking to people. And I want to go ahead and dive deeper. That's why I like talking to people that don't necessarily align with me. I mean, I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, James, but you are openly a moderate, a centrist, more or less. And Edward has problems like understanding those words, or he tries to hold me accountable. It's like, what does centrist mean? What does moderate mean? And I like that kind of conversation. And to me, okay, I'm sorry. You want to go ahead and define that?
Yeah, I'll kind of.
Sure.
Here's the thing. For me, most of my life, some of the, if you look at things at like a policy level, or if I'm gonna like steal some words from the way that Jordan Peterson phrases it, the right and the left are basically problem-solving mechanisms with different methodologies. And based on the problem, I think the solution sometimes comes down more on the right, sometimes it comes down more on the left. That's more how I look at it. So the kind of like counter gravity of that and my overall desire to bring people from right and left together, or at least de-escalate hostility, usually lands me to look like a centrist. There are some things like I'm absolutely going to be pretty hard right when it comes to things like our Second Amendment and gun rights. I'm going to be pretty hard right, though not without exception, as we discussed previously, when it comes to abortion. But I'm going to be pretty hard left when it comes to like, I don't think people should be choosing between groceries and going to the doctor. I don't think that there's something.
And what do you mean by that exactly? you mean that you would be for you like
I would like
universal health
universal
care and
health care. Yeah,
Hmm?
I would. I don't want people to be
That's really interesting. Yeah.
worried about, going to the doctor. I think I don't know if, we talk about the words rights. I don't know if it fits properly into rights, but I think that we're such a wealthy nation, at least in the United States. I can't speak for other nations. We're such a wealthy nation that there is more than enough money to get this done. We're
Hmm.
clearly misusing our resources if we're not, if we're
Agree. Yeah.
pretending that it can't be done. So I'm like, that's a pretty hard left take.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Another thing that I'm pretty hard left, is I'm almost but not 100% aligned with that. Edward, you brought up the United Nations, what is it, the
The
UNDF,
the Universal
Universal
Declaration of Human
Human
Rights,
Rights.
like
Yeah,
from
that Article
1949.
25, paragraph 1,
Hmm.
that one where they say that everyone should have kind of like a
Ah,
baseline
yeah, you mentioned
quality
that.
of
Yeah.
life. I actually do kind of believe that. Like, I think that that should be the case. I've advocated for that for, over 10 years. There's a practical issue with it that I don't know how to solve for, which is individuals who refuse to participate in a system set up to honor that if everyone were participating.
Yeah.
And what you mean by that, I think that was like everybody should have a home. I mean, like
Yeah, like,
that shouldn't be
so to
homeless.
me, like, if you work, in my opinion, you work 40 hours a week, that we've decided that that's what full-time is in the United States. Okay, so you're 100% opted in to living with the system that we set up. You're working, you're contributing to society. You
Mm,
should have a home. You should be able to go to the doctor. You
yeah.
should have the basic kind of
Mm,
protection from the elements, that you would expect. Heating, cooling, etc.
mm,
I really think that I agree with that sentiment. I don't know how to solve for people that don't want to participate or would
mm.
prefer to have their funds to use on things that are going to be self-destructive.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
that's what it's about. This is what our topic of discussion is to make a
So,
coherent
oh
argument, a
wait,
good
so
argument.
before
how to get that.
so putting that back to the context of where do I come down as a centrist, you see how the counter-gravity of those kind of pull me, like, both of those different items are pretty farther, they're pretty solidly in the conservative and then pretty solidly in the liberal.
Hmm.
And the counter-gravity of that
yeah.
kind of pulls me into the center.
I
Yeah.
know. I'm sorry. Could I
Uh,
just go ahead? I mean,
yeah. Please
one
go
of the
ahead,
things
Emilio.
that I found a lot of common ground with what James said. That's how I sounded
Me too.
before in the past when I was like, I saw myself as a moderate centrist, but I'm like going like this. And that's what I'm like thinking, okay, how can I see tangible benefits like Medicare for all, solving problems with homeless issues in the United States, recognizing that we're the richest country, one of the richest countries in the world. I mean, we're not the richest. I mean, we have some competition out there, but that's more government. You want more government involvement, and that's not a characteristic of the right. So if you want to vote for something that's going to go toward the momentum of all those topics, we have to kind of like not necessarily give up anything, but we have to be able to, I can't even think of the word, give a balance. So in order to get that, I know you said you're for guns and all that. I can't really think of any crazy gun reform that I can see passing that's going to be left wing. They're not going to take away guns. It makes too much money.
California has a lot of
Well, that's true.
prohibitive
I'm in
regulations.
Texas, so I do see it differently. Yeah.
I'm not as aware of other states around the country. Some states have started to adopt constitutional carry. I'm for that. There's a weird problem with constitutional carry though, because if we really had that everywhere, what about places that already have high crime rates? Do we have
Could you explain constitutional carry real quick? I'm not
constitutional carry is basically a law that some states have enacted that is, it's like a pure superficial reading of the Second Amendment. You have a right to have a gun, you have a right to have it on you. Doesn't matter what type of gun it is, period. You can go anywhere. You can go into there, you can probably find videos of them. There are people in stores walking around, they have like a rifle on their shoulder or something. So that is,
So you're against that, right?
no, I'm not. I'm not against that. The problem that I see with it
Mhm.
is, what about places that have a high crime rate where violence is already an issue? If you try to control for that, like, what I think would be the problem with it in the United States is, if you're trying to control for constitutional carry, you're going to end up controlling for places that have higher crime, which are disproportionately along racial lines, which then turns your gun control legislation into racial segregation laws. And it's probably just better to have something more equal and take constitutional carry off the table for everybody, because you would definitely take it off the table for some.
It's really interesting because you're from California. You probably don't see people openly carrying their firearms
No,
too
you
often.
can't.
Yeah,
You have to.
I see that
In
here.
California, you
Yeah.
can't. You have to have it like in your car. You have to have the ammunition in a separate part of your car from the gun itself.
So what kind of culture do you think that will establish, of allowing people to just carry their guns? Do you think people would be responsible with that? Do you think people would be good advocates? Because I'm kind of because the way I got trained to use firearms is not to brandish your firearm. That's a form of respect. It's a tool. I've never seen it as an appendage of my masculinity. And that's the gun culture that I really don't really like, because I feel like they don't respect it as being a good example as a responsible gun owner. I've seen people walk into a gas station with their pistol and they don't look, very professional. They're just all like, camo. It's a lifestyle. It's like buying your new Reeboks pumps. It's just like an accessory. And that bothers me a little bit, because it's not necessarily for your rights. It's an identity. And it doesn't always preach the responsible kind of behavior. And that's my authoritarian, and that's my right-wing mentality, because that's how I was taught to use a firearm. Because, I do embrace the Second Amendment, but I was taught very responsibly and to respect it as a tool, not to see it as a part of my culture. So that's the issue I have with people just wanting to show it, because they're like, you can see they're like, I'm like, that's not a healthy culture right there to me. That's just my
Right,
take.
Emiliano, you've mentioned the
Yes.
word responsibility twice. What about like how people can be determined to buy a gun? When I was in the States one time,
Background checks.
yeah, but I went into a gun shop and asked if I could buy a gun, and it was in Denver, Colorado, and he said,
Mhm.
yeah, you can buy one. And I said, what do I need to prove? And I believe I had to fill out a form, and I guess they would do a background check on me.
Yeah, and
But I
it's
could,
even,
but I could take the gun, and then they would do the background check. That's something that, like in Germany here, it's just like it's as if you guys are just allowing anybody to drive
and I don't think it's like that in
any.
California. It's a little bit more restrictive, isn't it, James?
In California, it depends on the class of gun. I would imagine that's the same in Colorado. If it's a pistol versus
Yeah,
a
but
rifle or a shotgun,
And look
or
what the gun culture has done in Texas. Yeah, you don't really need a background check. It's your right. It's become an identity, and it's reflected in our legislation now. And we
but
can make
but
an argument how safe it is now when we have people shooting up kids in elementary schools.
but why isn't this just obvious to everybody that you need to own a gun, something that can kill somebody in a second, that you need to have a whole process set up, something like a driver's license, and even comparing how to get a driver's license and how much it costs in Germany and the States. It costs over €1,000 here. Which is like $1,000 to
Yeah,
get a
it would be a
driver's
good
license.
idea of your
Plus, it takes.
competency of using a
I mean,
let,
firearm.
let, let
it
me
takes
try to
a number of months. Whereas I got a driver's license. I answered 20 questions on a multiple choice test, I believe, in high school, and it cost me, I think, I don't know, $30 or something. I mean, this whole thing of how much responsibility does a person have to prove to drive a car, and then to own a gun that can kill somebody. That's I mean, that's the thing that people in Europe just can't understand. It's stupidity, and stupidity is defined as doing things that are not in your best interest. I mean, just passing out things that can kill people in a second. That's not smart. I mean, regardless of how people carry it into a gas station. I mean, it's just, you know, you don't let people fly planes
Yeah.
just because it's in our constitution that everybody can have a plane
We
or something.
have like
It
certain
doesn't matter. I mean,
NRA meetings
just
where
not
you
safe.
ban
Well,
guns, the guns,
I
not
mean,
all of them, but there's some.
let me do two quick things at once, because I think I have
Yeah.
a pretty quick response for you, Emiliano,
Okay,
about
sure.
the gun culture, and then I can get a little bit more into, I think, what may be contributing to what Edward is seeing, in terms of why isn't it obvious that this should be more difficult to buy a gun.
Mhm.
A lot of people smoke marijuana in the United States, like an incredible amount. But then there's just this really kind of small percentage that drip 420 culture. Now, me personally, I
wait, can you
find,
explain that? I'm sorry, I don't drip
so
420 culture.
420 is a colloquialism for, where is your weed at? Like it's 4:20 p.m. Where's your weed or your bong or your marijuana at?
It's not
420,
legal in
April
Texas.
20th is kind of a semi-celebratory day
Okay, I haven't heard of that.
in that culture. Yeah. And so there are like shops
That's
that
good.
cater to that lifestyle. You've got the t-shirts and other kind of paraphernalia, all kinds of bongs and smoking apparatus and just other things. Some people they just drip it from head to
Okay.
toe. So I personally find that style, that kind of culture, it bothers me. But just because I find it distasteful, and personally marijuana is not for me. But does that invalidate all the people that just participate in marijuana and really have nothing to do with anything else? Like it doesn't run into anything else. So for the gun culture, like Emiliano, yeah, it's distasteful because maybe guns aren't so much for you outside of a
No,
very specific
guns are not
use.
distasteful for me. I like guns, but guns
Well,
can kill you. Marijuana can't.
That's right.
If you
Yeah,
want to
but
compare the
I mean,
statistics, the deaths,
it's not like,
I like
sorry,
guns.
yeah, but there's
that's me
a
being a little too literal on you
Well,
there.
no,
But
I mean, but I understand. I'll be charitable.
obviously,
I know what you're trying to say to
yeah,
culture,
but the
and
guns
that's
are
what I'm
much
against.
more dangerous
There's
than
sure,
marijuana.
sure,
yeah,
sure.
and there's different
But
kinds of culture with the gun culture too. There's factions. I'm a responsible gun owner, and I want to be a good advocate for using firearms. That's how I am. I was taught by somebody that had an arsenal, and he would teach me
right,
how to
but
respect it. And
you always have some people that are just obnoxious. This is what I'm getting at, and that doesn't invalidate. They could be obnoxious and correct.
Well, that's why we have statistics, and there's a lot of goofy scenarios where people get hurt. And I agree with you 100% where a lot of violence are in the inner cities and where there's poverty. But there's
Right.
a lot of issues that are happening with domestic abuse too.
But okay, so let me switch over though, because I want to get back to Edward's thing.
Sure.
Edward, I think what has probably happened where it's first some people not obvious is it goes back a little bit to the period in the United States where there wasn't a police force in the way it is. For the first 100+ years of the country's existence, people's protection was up to themselves. So there's that culture. Today, there's still some amount of people that live in areas where it's just a practical matter to have some kind of a gun because of wild animals. And it's if you're running a ranch or a farm, that's probably going to be a part of it, depending if you're adjacent to a mountain or forestry that might have grizzly bears or other mountain lions. You need to be able to handle those. And so those parents, as a matter of course, are teaching their kids that they bring along with them how to use those guns So that's where, and I think what happens is that mentality and that need gets conflated and mishmashed in like the public, in the general subconscious idea that we should just have guns and it shouldn't be a big deal because it's so part of just normal life, first historically, and then in some specific places, that it kind of like glommed on to just generality.
Well, I can add
Yeah.
I can add to what James just said. I mean, I came from a rural area and we use guns exactly for that reason. You have coyotes that kill your livestock. You'd have, you know, an animal you would have to put out of your misery. So you want to do the most humane way to end something that's in pain's life. But one of the issues, like James said, it's becoming a part of the mentality of other people. We have like, I used to call it like the city people mentality. They buy some land and then they want to fit in. It's like, well, we're going to get guns. You can just hear them go, pop, 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 shooting all day. And I'm like, this is not somebody from our area. This is somebody that's new, and then we'll see bullet holes in our cows. They're not responsible. They're not. And I've seen some articles in Texas about some lady in her truck. She pops her handgun in the back and she has her child in the child seat. She gets it. The kid gets it and it shoots it through the seat and shoots her.
Right.
I mean, you have a lot of people that use guns irresponsibly. I mean, we have bullet holes in our cows, and I'm just like, all these city people wanting to be cowboys. There's a saying in Spanish to vaquero sin caballos. So it's just like you're a cowboy without a horse. I mean, there's a lot of wannabes. You're a tough guy. It's like I said, it's your identity. Now that you're going to be in Texas, we have a lot of people moving to Texas. So it's just like, I see a lot of issues with the crime and poverty, but I also see a lot of issues of just people wanting to buy guns and not really, like you said, Edward, there's no training, there's no background checks, and you're letting pretty much idiots get something that can kill you.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Emiliano, what do you think if, you know, like Texas or the United States were to pass a law that just made, you know,
common sense?
Getting a gun meant that you had to go through training of how to use it, show that you know how to use it, and you know, and make it I'm trying to think of something realistic, like
I understand the argument of it being all right.
It's quite cheap, so that most people could do it, so that's not a barrier. But that you just have to show some responsibility. Do you think that would?
Yeah. I agree. Okay, this is something James might like, what I'm about to say.
Yeah, but do you think that the people who, like your neighbors, or I think that's who you said, would just shoot random things all day, and the grandma
Trigger happy, they buy guns, and they just
and who put
shoot it
her
in the air.
gun in the back seat so her child could get it? Do you think those people would do the training? I mean,
they wouldn't have a choice.
That might,
the way I'm about to
that
recommend
might bring down the accident rate quite a bit.
Yeah, in the 60s, I think, James, they train people to use guns in high schools, in public schools. I remember because I have some right-wing people in my family, and they're gun activists, and they would say back in the day, we used to train our youth to use guns. It wasn't a big deal. I used to go to high school with people with shotguns in the back of their truck. I mean, in the window of their truck with I already forgot. Terminology's pits. But anyways, they had shotguns. I mean, because if you had coyotes chasing your cattle, you need something right there and then. No one was freaked out with somebody with a loaded gun in the back of their pickup. I mean, that's just, we were in a rural area. No one threatened each other with a gun because we didn't have the mindset of a city person that's going to use that as an identity factor. It was a tool. So when you have people like in gangs, like, yo, what's up? It's the wimpiest dude's going to come out packing, you know, because that's who he is. He's tougher now with that. So yeah,
I mean, I think part of what needs to happen to address the culture, though, well, all right, let me go back to that real quick.
Sure.
I would absolutely 100% be for some kind of like training certification involved that's both safety and usage. That's what I've been actually looking for. I've been considering buying a gun. I haven't yet because I want to get a kind of a basic certification from a course before I do. And I want my kid to take it as well because, you know, with basically there's escalated violence in the United States, and I'm not super comfortable not having a method of defense anymore. But I'm very adamant, like about not just buying a gun. I want to get, certified. So I would support legislation. I think something like that in California would probably actually sail through. Getting some kind of a certificate of it's really not that much. A safety course is probably at most like an hour, and then basic, care and maintenance of it, another hour. Is not something that would be prohibitively expensive to do. But so I would be for that. Culture wise though, I think part of the problem is that we've kind of like made guns taboo. And so there's something of an element of indulging a vice, and we need to make it like a screwdriver. It needs to be as boring as a tool, for people to stop, romanticizing them and toting them in that way.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. You can go.
Regardless, I still think that's the.
No. That's what.
What don't you think is going to happen anytime soon exactly?
Well, like the way they market firearms. I mean, I just went down to the Colony, and they have a big old sports
Sorry,
store.
what's the Colony?
It's a city. It's a city. And there's a really nice shopping area. And we were just seeing the gun area because my wife wanted to go see, because, for the same reason James is, for protection. And I'm just curious, like James is super responsible with his mentality of going through that preparation to get a firearm. But I'm kind of curious, people like James, if they were to come to Texas, would they still have that mindset, knowing that Texas offers a lot more of a liberty to just get the gun without going through background checks and just getting it and just, whatever. And that's the thing. I think James might be an exception, but I think many people,
there aren't people like me.
Yeah. Yeah. But James, I think you probably might say, yeah, they'd probably be like, yeah, let's go get a gun. Whatever, but it is important to do the due diligence of just like what you're going to get. Cause like Edward is pointing out, it's dangerous. You need to be someone that could use it. And there's just a lot of people that just get it for, I don't know. They just think it's a part of their identity. Like it's your Second Amendment, you're American. I personally don't own a firearm anymore. I live in the city and I don't have a place to practice. And a lot of accidents happen with kids in the house where guns are. So I know that. Yeah. So as a responsible person and a person who knows how to use a gun and it's used a gun, I just don't have a need for it. So I don't have to fulfill my identity to have a gun in Texas. I just don't need it. I'd rather spend my money on something else. But people don't have that discipline, or they just want to think that they have to do it to own the libs or something. And, I mean, if I have a need, if I go get some land, I'll get a gun. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, but that's very convincing. I had never thought of that, James. The Wild West, of course, I mean, I've read a couple novels of the Wild West, and that's how it was. Everybody had a gun like they had a knife or anything else that you needed back then. And but so this mentality, I mean, that's in the West, in the Western states, but like the United States is also New York and the Bronx and that kind of thing. It's just I mean, and just as comparison here, I mean, I don't know anybody who has a gun except my uncle-in-law, and he's a hunter. And he went through not an hour, not 2 hour courses on how to use it, but I think weeks, and it was very expensive. He has guns in the house and they're locked up and they have to be locked up. And I mean, it's just, I mean, I've never even seen them. Whereas in the States, you see guns everywhere.
Does he live in the rural area, Edward?
Yeah. And he owns deer. He has, 12 deer in his backyard, and, they eat a deer every year and that kind of thing. And he has to kill it and that kind of thing. So it's just, but you just don't have the mentality of the Wild West here, because there is no Wild West anymore. And there are no bears, there are no wolves, that kind of thing.
It would be hard for me to kind of theorize what's in the cultural memory of Germany, because I don't know of a time in Germany's history, because I don't know German history aside from how they get brought up in World War I and II. but I don't know of a time where the citizenry, had to rise up against its own government. I don't know the history of police force and public security, and how that might interact with them or not. So
Yeah,
it would
and
be very
when they
hard for me
got
to
rid of it.
theorize.
Yeah, but I mean, there is a